fifth in a series of 6 workshops. So there's one more in the series put on by OCECD, and the next one is all about English and Spanish language supports from OCECD. And we're going to skip July, and that's going to be the second Monday in August, which will end this series. And then we're not sure what the next series is yet, but we're going to start a new series of workshops specifically for parents of children with disabilities and educators of children with disabilities. So if you want to sign up for any of the following workshops or look and see what the series is, once we decide that, you can go to that same link, lawyersforstudents.com. That's a number 4 in the middle, lawyersforstudents.com/legal clinic. And that's where you sign up. And I'll be quiet now, and I'll pass it on to Tammy and Martha. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And hello, everyone. Good evening, and thanks for joining us, especially on a nice warm day in Ohio. So I just wanted to briefly do a short introduction and let you all know we have some light housekeeping we have to go over. I will be sharing in the chat box a couple of links throughout the training, and then also our handout links. We also have a registration and evaluation link. Mark, I'm not sure if you still have that link, if you're able to share it. But at the end of the training, we also have a QR code. So if you are tech savvy and fancy and like the QR codes, we'll have a slide at the end and you can just take your phone and scan it. We really rely on those pre-post evaluations to really be able to bring you these trainings for free. And we really look at and value your input and your feedback so we can improve and make our trainings better. So with that being said, I am going to introduce Martha, and you did a really good job with Martha's last name, Mark. So I'm going to introduce Martha Lazay with the Ohio Coalition, and she's going to present taking a closer look at ADHD. And you can ask, I'm going to be watching the chat box. So if you want to go ahead and throw questions in the chat box, I will be looking at those and I'll throw those to Martha as we go along. So don't be afraid, but we're also going to save a little bit of time at the end to do some Q&A too. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Martha.
Well, good evening, everyone. As Tammy said, this is our presentation on taking a closer look at ADHD. And those of you who are parents or teachers of children with disabilities, you know that there needs to be an ongoing commitment to raise and teach a child with ADHD. Next. Next slide, Tammy. Okay, sorry. I'm not seeing the next slide, Tammy.
Can you see it, Mark?
Yeah, I can. Let's see. Martha, do you have a view button in the top right-hand corner?
Yes.
If you click on view, and then maybe move to, what do you have there with the check mark next to it?
I don't have any check mark.
When you click on view, what do you see?
I'm not seeing anything right now. So I see the slide, but it's real tiny down here in the right corner, Tammy. Is there any way you can put it up here where your big slide is that you started with? I'm so sorry, everybody who's attending.
No, it's okay. This is the only way I can do it, Martha.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
I was counting on being able to see really large print. Okay. So our next slide is what is ADHD? ADHD is a diagnostic and statistical manual diagnosis, better known as DSM-5. There is a new version out with TR after the 5, but they did not alter the definitions or diagnosis strategies or identification of ADHD as a disability. The DSM-5 lists 3 types of ADHD. attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, predominantly inattentive, attention deficit hyperactivity, predominantly hyperactive, impulsive type, and then attention deficit hyperactivity disorder combined type. ADHD results in age inappropriate levels of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. So this means that a child with ADHD may be developmentally or socially 3 to 5 years behind their peers. Often you hear the terms their functional age versus their chronological age. And the functional age may be that of a 7-year-old and their chronological age may be that of a 10-year-old. ADHD generally is thought to be an inherited neurobiological disorder. Next. The first type of ADHD we'll talk about is the inattentive ADHD. Oftentimes this is referred to as ADD, even though the term was removed from the DSM-5. A lot of professionals still use this term to differentiate between the hyperactive and the combined type of ADHD and the inattentive type, since they present so differently. Once your child is identified with the type of ADHD, you can now then develop behavioral and educational modifications to turn these deficits into strengths. Children with ADHD have the potential to develop the best day planners you've ever seen, see things that no one else sees, to ask insightful questions, to go where they do not know they are not supposed to go, and to learn more than adults give them credit for. And my son is one of those that sees things that nobody else sees. He is extremely inattentive ADHD, but works in cybersecurity because his mind works differently than anybody else's mind that interviewed for the job. He sees gray and most people don't see gray. He only notices black and white. So if gray pops up on his screen, he knows it's not supposed to be there. Next. The hyperactive impulsive type of ADHD is probably the one that attracts the most attention in a school setting. These are the children that fidget with hands or feet. They squirm around. They are up and down out of their seats, wandering around the classroom. They have difficulty playing quietly. They may talk too much, blurt out answers, and they may intrude into conversations, not realizing that they have to wait their turn. For children with the hyperactive impulsive ADHD, skills need to be taught that would include social skills, time management, organizational skills, listening skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills, and managing time on task skills. Parents and teachers do have the ability to change the environment, to change how they present the information, and to watch their tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language when they talk with children with ADHD. Some children with ADHD have what I call supersonic hearing, and sometimes the tone of voice may sound normal to you, but it may sound like yelling to the child. So if a student or your child tells you that you are yelling at them and you are not, it could be that they have supersonic hearing like my son does. Next. The combined type of ADHD are those that have both inattentive behaviors combined with the hyperactive impulsive behaviors. These, by statistics, usually are the most typical kids in a classroom, but usually the combined inattentive takes care of the hyperactive or modifies it enough that it doesn't draw the same attention that the only hyperactive children present in a classroom. In order to have a diagnosis of ADHD, these all have to be present and persist as symptoms for at least 6 months, and they must negatively impact social and academic and occupational activities. Oftentimes, parents will call the Ohio Coalition and they will state, my child's been diagnosed with this, why doesn't the school do anything? And essentially, it's usually because at that point in time in their academic career, there is no negative impact on their educational achievement or their functional performance, and the teachers do not see a need to provide any type of supports. Of course, that usually changes as children age up through the educational system. Next. So why do you need a diagnosis? Usually schools will tell parents they have to have ADHD diagnosed in order for them to provide assistance or supports through either special education or accommodations. However, ADHD may be identified by knowledgeable school personnel. If you are in the need of any kind of medical support, then definitely you do have to have a medical diagnosis done by either a medical doctor, a behavioral pediatrician, a behavioral neurologist, a clinical child psychologist, or child psychiatrist. The advantage to the diagnosis is to understand how ADHD affects behavior. Usually the diagnostician does prepare a list of what to look for as the parent and also for the teacher. If prescribed medications are indicated, that would be part of your diagnosis. But do keep in mind, Ohio law does prohibit mandatory medication as a reason to provide supports for children with ADHD. They may help older children to understand themselves. It will help the school to develop educational goals and determine school accommodations. And it could determine additional services in the way of speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, or mental health counseling, depending on what the diagnostician determines are your child's needs and how those can be remediated in a school setting in your home environment. Always keep in mind, the more you as parents and teachers know about ADHD and how it manifests in children, the better you will be able to help them as both parent and educator. Parents and teachers often function as coaches or cheerleaders for their children with ADHD. Next. Executive function is one of the key components now with an ADHD diagnosis. So does ADHD equal executive function deficit disorder? According to Russell Barkley, who is somewhat the patron of the diagnostic strategies used for ADHD, both in home and school, his quote is, "The neuroanatomy and neuropsychology of ADHD virtually guarantee it." ADHD and executive functions almost always now appear in evaluations that are done for kids in the school setting. Probably 10 years ago, executive function was not in the picture, but now it has taken oftentimes the forefront of IEP and accommodation services other than reading and math and written expression. Your executive functions are what will impact you more as an adult than any else. That will be a long-term effect of having a diagnosis of ADHD. Next. What exactly are your executive functions? These are often thought of your director or CEO of the brain, the conductor of the orchestra, and executive functions include initiation and activation. And this is the ability to begin a task without excessive procrastination. This is always on usually an accommodation for kids to learn how to start a task within a certain time frame rather than procrastinate. That is part of their executive function deficits. Memory skills include working memory and recall. And this is the ability to hold information in your brain, work with it, and pull it back out. This often impacts math skills. Effort is regulating alertness, effort, and processing speed. Processing speed often impacts a child with an ADHD diagnosis because they're distracted, and that does slow down their processing speed. Emotional control is their ability to manage frustration and regulate emotions. If these are not managed in the way of supporting strategies in the school, this leads to your meltdowns and other issues that often impact kids with ADHD in a school setting and at home. Focus is sustaining and shifting your focus. And focus sometimes even goes to the point of what is called hyperfocus. And that is when the child is so focused they cannot change their focus. And this happens with video games and other activities on cell phones and computers. Planning and organization is your next executive function, and this involves creating and prioritizing order and structure. And the last executive function is self-monitoring. This is noticing yourself in action and self-talking to yourself. This didn't work the last time, let's not do it again. And usually they don't have that working memory to recall, so self-monitoring also becomes a major issue, especially as kids get older. Next. Understanding the impact of ADHD on your executive functions. ADHD would disrupt the 7 components of executive functions. Oftentimes, organization and time management turns into a diagnosis of time blindness. This means that the ADHD brain does not recognize the passage of time. They may think they're working on something for 20 minutes, whereas it may be 4 hours, or the other way around. They may tell you they've been working on it forever, but it's been 20 minutes. Adversely affects your organization across time, anticipation of the future and pursuit of long-term goals. Anticipation of the future hits for the student because they can't plan ahead for that project that's due a month from now. That's not in their here and now world. Usually the ADHD brain operates in the here and now, not in long-term goals. And that is why a lot of strategies in IEP, special education services, and accommodations address how to plan for the future. And it is not an attention deficit, but inattention to events and future planning. Next. Always remember that children with ADHD are not broken. They cannot be fixed. This is the way their brain operates. They may have average to above average IQ scores. Many may be socially and emotionally behind their peers. This usually happens with boys, usually about mid-5th grade. They start to no longer blend in with their peer group. They may be very creative. That is why a lot of artists and musicians are also diagnosed with ADHD. They may get along better with children who are either younger or older than they are. That is because those younger or older children don't have the same social expectations for this child as their actual age peer group might. They may be risk takers. A lot of people that do risky behaviors, and even like jet fighter pilots, are also risk takers that may have a component of ADHD. They may be quick to take action or experiment, and they may be out-of-box thinkers. A lot of inventions were invented by out-of-box thinkers that were also diagnosed with an ADHD brain, such as Einstein, Thomas Edison, and lots of other inventors. And you can go online and you can find all kinds of lists of people that were successful because of their ability to think outside the box. Next. IDEA is the federal law that mandates a free, appropriate public education, better known as FAPE, F-A-P-E, for children with disabilities who are determined to be eligible for special education services. Usually schools refer to this as specially designed instruction. Your specially designed instruction includes academic achievement, and that focuses on reading, math, and written expression. Your functional performance, which usually are your executive functions, behavior, social skills, and then the related services that include occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language services, and now currently most of the related services also include mental health support. The child must go through an initial evaluation process. which starts with a letter by the parent to the school requesting this initial evaluation. The school will do the evaluation. They have 60 days once they agree to that your child needs an evaluation to proceed. And this is it in a nutshell. There's a lot more detail on our website and our publication on the evaluation process if you need more information. But once the initial evaluation is done, the school will meet with you, the parent, and they will review the evaluation in what is a document entitled an ETR, or an evaluation team report. Section 4 of the evaluation team report lists a category of service. The category of service are those 13 eligibility categories as defined under IDEA law. Children with ADHD usually fall under the category of other health impairment. However, they may also fall under specific learning disability, emotional disturbance. Children that have comorbid diagnoses such as autism could go under an autism category of service, with still those accommodations and services that would address anything related to the ADHD diagnosis. However, the category of service in Section 4 can be only one of those categories. And usually for kids with ADHD with no extenuating other disability areas, almost always go under other health impairment. And usually there's a little disclaimer that says minor after it. Major are the children that usually do need medical support in a school setting, and minor are those that do not need that medical support. Next. In addition to special education services, kids with ADHD also may qualify for Section 504 services under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Right now, the federal government is looking at Section 504 to revise its standards so that it is more current as opposed to what was available in 1973. In 2016, they sent out a guidance document to all the schools in the United States for children with ADHD that were not being appropriately served under Section 504. It was 44 pages. And in this document, it also specified that under Section 504, children with ADHD not requiring special designed instruction as with an IEP were also eligible to receive speech and language services, occupational services, physical therapy, and mental health support. So that was a big change a few years ago. And a child with ADHD who is not eligible for special education usually is provided a Section 504 plan by the school district. If they start with a Section 504 plan, these are mainly accommodations. If the evaluation is after the 504 is initiated, the accommodations on that Section 504 plan may move over to the accommodation section of the IEP in Section 7. There's a subsection called accommodations. So the Section 504 accommodations may move into your IEP. And for children that have an IEP and no longer need specially designed instruction, they may move over to a Section 504 plan, and those accommodations then would transition from their IEP over to their 504 plan. The Section 504 is mandated under federal law, just like IDEA is. They also have to provide a free, appropriate public education. So everything is under that A word, appropriate. And under Section 504, a person with a disability is defined as an individual, one, with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. These include eating, sleeping, walking, standing, lifting, bending, reading, concentrating, thinking, and communicating. As you can see, a lot of those major life activities will impact a child with ADHD. The second component is who has a record of such an impairment, or 3 is regarded as having such an impairment. And this is where schools can identify a child who has not been diagnosed, but they may identify ADHD. Then they write up a document that is usually referred to as either a Section 504 plan or just a 504 plan. They are legally binding technically the whole life of your child. If you go into a work world, 504 accommodations are also in the work environment. Complaints are handled through the Office for Civil Rights in Cleveland, not through the Ohio Department of Education, because it is a civil rights-based law, not an education law. The advantage of a Section 504 plan is that it applies to college students with disabilities. Children that are on IEPs will transition over to 504 plans if they go on to college or if they need accommodations on the work site. IEPs will terminate at the age of 22 or graduation, whichever happens first. And for the most part, most students in Ohio will exit IEPs with graduation. There are what school districts may call their 12 plus students or super seniors, and those are the children that continue IEP services up until the age of 22. Next slide. The basics for parents and teachers to work together. Communication is the utmost important, strategy for parents and teachers to build positive relationships with each other. This requires frequent and ongoing positive communication between families and teachers. And positive sometimes is very difficult because a lot of times all parents hear is what their child did wrong, not what their child did right. So teachers and parents have to always look for the positives so that they can reinforce the positive behaviors. Written notes and home school notebooks also help. So the school can send a note home to you, the parent, what is needed for the next day or what did not happen that day, some positive, experiences that the teacher saw and want to compliment your child on, and then you can send similar information back to the school. You can also phone, text, or email with the school. I know a lot of schools are being more open to text messages, but email and phone messages are probably a better option. Emails do give you that written component under Ohio guidance or law. Unofficially, anything done verbally never happened. So email is always a good strategy because that way your conversations back and forth are recorded in writing. You may wish to schedule meetings at the beginning of the school year to introduce your child to your teachers. You can do a one-page summary of your child. These are my child's strengths and weaknesses. These are the hobbies, pets, and any other information that might affect academic performance. Planning how and when parents will communicate builds trust, and it puts a system in place for when problems do arise so that you have had open communication with the school before that happens. Notebooks and journals can be included as an accommodation on both IEPs and Section 504 plans, so it can go into both documents. Next. Practices for routines. Keeping a schedule is very, very important for children with ADHD. There needs to be a time for school, a time for homework, a time for chores, and a time for bed. You must be consistent. Repeat, repeat, repeat. However, keep it simple. Verbal and written directions always help. Give directions one step at a time. Sometimes schools will give 3 or 4 directions at a time. Usually 3 is the maximum that a ADHD brain can keep in their working memory and move forward. I often hear from my son, Mom, you gave me 5 directions. I can't keep it all in my head. What were the first 3? So even as an adult, keep your directions simple. Ask children to repeat back to you what you said. Check often to see if the child is actually following the directions or perhaps is daydreaming and just faking to be paying attention. And children are very good at faking attention. And also model finished products. A lot of times children don't know what the end goal is supposed to look like. So if you can show them what the end product is to look like, that often helps with their initiative to keep moving forward and the perseverance to do the complete job. Children with ADHD are internally disorganized, so these schedules and routines help them to organize their thoughts and follow through. And definitely have your child repeat back what you said to check for understanding. Teachers also will do this to make certain that they understood what the assignment entails. Model what doing homework looks like. Model how to walk down the hallway without touching other kids. Model classroom or house rules. Children with ADHD do not pick up or follow what their peers are doing. They are usually so involved with keeping their own little boat afloat that they do not have time to notice what's going on around them. So you do need direct instruction to master functional and social skills. And change is very difficult for kids with ADHD. So transitions from one activity to another activity should be accommodated both in a section 504 or as accommodations in your IEP to allow time for them to move from point A to point B, or to change from the history lesson to the English lesson. Next. Environment tips for parents and teachers. The home and the classroom environment is very important for success for kids with ADHD. Seat students near positive role models rather than in a row with all of the ADHD kids all together. Remove unrelated clutter from the room so that they are not looking at the artwork on the wall instead of paying attention to what the teacher is saying. Try to set up distraction-free study areas away from windows, noises, phones, and people. And some schools have set up study carrels for kids with ADHD in order to help them stay focused. It's not mandatory, but for some children, it works miracles. And sometimes playing music will help a child to focus. And if that is true for your child, then it would be worth the investment into earbuds so that they can listen to their music. Some kids like classical music, some folks, some calming music. I know there's a Calm app for iPhones that will play calming activities. If you get too hyper and can't sit still, that will help calm down. And the uncluttered environment will help because if their minds are disorganized and the space around them is disorganized, it adds to their stress because everything is disorganized. And so if you can get rid of some of that disorganization around them, it will help their mind to focus. They also need to keep in mind that children need to provide, or I should say, teachers need to provide reassurance and direction assistance when shifting from one task to the next. Don't expect them to be at the next point in time when their mind is still at the last point in time. So discuss music that may or may not help and discuss the type of music that they may like. And definitely consider earbuds for your child rather than headphones. A lot of children feel self-conscious with wearing headphones, so earbuds work fine in those situations, especially for older children. If they need noise cancellation headphones, that might be a different issue. But if you're looking at music as a way to take care of the outside noises, it's kind of like the elevator music or white music. So that will help them focus on the task at hand. Next slide. Organization tips for parents and teachers. Here are some more good ideas. Notebook organizers, short tasks and clear objectives, note cards for studying, assignment books, and review often what is in the assignment book. Oftentimes what appears in the assignment book is not what the assignment really is. That's why I always recommend either having their child take a picture of the assignment with their phone, or have it sent to the parent either by email or text message so that the assignment gets to the parent and they know what they are doing for homework. Calendars for assignments and due dates. This helps with that future planning if they can visualize and maybe check off the days on a big calendar at home so they can see the time going past in the way of days on a calendar when that assignment might be due. Set times each day to organize your school materials for your child and the bedroom. Help limit that chaos. Teach organizational skills that should be functional goals on an IEP, or they could be accommodations on your 504 plan. And accommodations can be written into both IEPs and 504 that will address organization. Always place checklists and to-do lists in folders or lockers. Day planners may work well for children that are older. Post-it notes work great. You can stick post-it notes everywhere, even on their phone, in book pages, on mirrors and doorways. Teach your children how to use like a Fitbit watch or something to that nature, or an iPhone watch that would send them alarms, visual timers, such as the timer clock. And cell phones also can be set to vibrate every 20 minutes or something like that to give them a little nudge to focus. Children know that they should come to class with all their books and materials, but they may be unable to hold that plan in the forefront of their brain until it can be acted on. That is why they need to learn strategies to help them to prepare and remember. This requires repeated practice and positive reinforcement. A book that I found very helpful was called Late, Lost, and Unprepared. And that is on the slide. When you print the slides at the end of the presentation, that will be on your slides. Next. Social skill tips for parents and teachers. Social skills need to be taught. They are not learned automatically or by observation. You need to teach how to approach a group of peers, how to join into a conversation without butting in. You need to teach them how to read facial expressions. Are their eyebrows up, down, frowns? So you can read a lot in facial expressions. You need to learn how to read body language. This is also very difficult for children with ADHD. They also have to learn their own body language. Sometimes they invade other people's personal space and they don't realize it. And they need to know that sometimes when people cross their arms, that means they're not really interested. If they're waving their hands around at you, they may be mad. So definitely teach them how to read body language. Also recognize tone of voice. Are they telling jokes? Are they being sarcastic? A lot of times they do not recognize sarcasm or know when people are telling jokes. There are books on how to recognize body language, especially for older kids who are teens. This plays a lot in their social skill development to recognize body language. Tone of voice, again, is, like I stated earlier, sometimes kids will say you're yelling at me when really you're not. Your tone of voice may be louder than what you think it is. And so that also plays into the volume along with your tone. Teach and practice appropriate responses in a variety of environments. So what is appropriate in the classroom might not be appropriate at grandma's house. So you do have to learn how to act in different environments. And functional goals and accommodations are written in the IEP. Accommodations would appear in your section 504 plan. The frontal cortex of the child's brain is where they develop slower than the peer group. And this is where their functional age and their chronological age also come into play for social skills. They may have the social skills of a 7-year-old, but their chronological age may be that of a 10 or 12-year-old. That will impact how they respond in their peer groups. This unfortunately also opens up children starting in middle school most frequently to being bullied because they no longer blend in with their peer group because their social skills are not at the same level as the peer group is. They need to be taught how to adapt to social functions. And remember, they don't read body language and facial expressions until they are taught how to read body language and facial expressions. When children are using inappropriate behaviors, it is wise then to set up a secret signal like with the teacher, so that the child can let the teacher know that they need to leave the room or go to a safe spot without embarrassing themselves. So you may have a set of cards on the desk, red, green, and yellow. And this is addressed also later in the safe place, so that if they're doing okay, the green card is up. If they're starting to get a little edgy, they put the yellow card up. If they're ready for meltdown time, then the red card goes up. And oftentimes teachers will have a set of prepared papers on their desk, and they will just point to the child and say, Johnny, run these down to the principal's office, and your child will get up, get the papers, and leave the room and go to their safe spot. This way that saves embarrassment, and they are not looked upon differently by their peer group. This is why also they need to be taught functional skills, so that they can use these same skills in the home environment and school environment to ensure consistency. They also lack social memory skills, so they can't remember what happened in a past similar situation. And so that has to be taught on how to predict how people will respond in a specific social situation. And social stories often will work well with this. If you're going to the supermarket, what do? You do not throw fruit around the store. Whatever the behavior is that's not appropriate can be addressed with social stories. Field trips, whatever you as the parent in the school would deem appropriate for your child to learn those social skills. Next. Movement and sensory breaks are also important for kids with ADHD. So schedule breaks during difficult academic activities and during homework. A lot of accommodations that I see on IEPs and 504 plans will say the child gets a break every 15 minutes. Permit physical movement, pacing, changing your seat, squeezing a stress ball, or running errands in the building. And definitely do not withhold recess or classroom breaks due to incomplete assignments. There has been no research study that confirmed the denial of recess will improve work performance or production. Children may need hands-on activities, and that would be your stress ball. And recess allows the child to release any pent-up energy. If the child is worried about losing their recess, they may make behaviors worse during the actual instructional time, because they keep seeing that moment in time where everybody leaves and they're left sitting in the classroom. And definitely do not deny opportunities to participate in organized sports. And this may increase their sense of academic and social inadequacy if they are not allowed to participate in sports. That is why it is often wise to have any coaches or other athletic people on your child's IEP or Section 504 plan, so that you can address any needs that that child may need in an athletic event. Next. Home and school choices are very important. Allow children to make choices, what to write with, paper, pen, pencil, what books to read, when to read, and regarding daily routines. Do I brush my teeth first and then comb my hair? Do I comb my hair and then brush my teeth? Kids can make those kind of decisions. And when given choices, oftentimes behavior tend to improve. Next slide. Presenting a new skill or subject matter tips for parents. So introduce one concept at a time. Don't overwhelm by doing too much too fast. Block into segments so that they can learn one part before they move on to the next part. You can cut and fold assignments so that they can only see parts of the assignment rather than the whole assignment, which may be overwhelming. You can color code or highlight or underline important information in a homework assignment or a study guide. Check often for understanding if they understand what the new skill or the subject matter is involved with. Emphasize key points, not so much the picky points. Written and verbal directions so that they have a reinforcement for verbal directions. They can look at the written directions if they forget. Shorten assignments and chores so that they do not become overwhelmed and distracted and not do anything. Monitor progress often. Go back and check on them. Don't assume that they are working diligently. They often are distracted by other things, even the bird outside the window. Frequent feedback, verbal and nonverbal. So a pat on the back, a smile, whatever works with your child. Definitely find out what works for your child as reinforcement. Do not pick something that is not a positive reinforcer. If they don't like smiley faces, do not put smiley faces on their homework or their study guides. Parents and teachers must remember that it is not acceptable to say, I don't allow that in my homework class, or it is not fair to other sibling students, or any other excuse that might deter them from providing what your child needs with ADHD to learn new skills or new information. Parents of elementary children with ADHD often report that they're spending 3 to 5 hours a night on homework. The National Education Association recommends the 10-minute rule. This means that kids should be doing about 10 minutes of homework per grade level. So a first grader should have 10 minutes, a second grader 20 minutes, and so on. If you are doing 3 to 5 hours of homework and your child is in 5th grade, definitely let the school know so that they can make adjustments to homework. So they can limit time, they can limit the number of questions, and definitely no busy work. If they already know the concept, they do not need to do busy work. Next slide. Accommodation tips for parents and teachers. Computers are very good for kids with ADHD. Note takers or teacher prepared notes, digital or tape recorders, printed outlines of video concepts. Limit recopying. Often what's on the board never ends up on the paper. The ADHD brain has a hard time getting what's from the board down their arm to their hand, to the pencil, to the paper, or even the keyboard. Grade on content, not handwriting. That's another issue that impacts a child with ADHD, is that message from the brain down the hand to the pencil and the paper often results in illegible handwriting, often known as dysgraphia. Provide written outlines when all possible, and study guides with correct answers. Don't let the child find the correct answers because that could take hours. Provide examples of completed assignments. Again, as we stated earlier, if they see the end product, they have a better chance of getting to that end goal. And for students preparing for college, note takers are also one of the most commonly provided Section 504 accommodations for kids that are going on to college. And 504 plans are critical also for kids that are doing post-secondary education or going into the work world. You can get accommodations even on your job site. Next slide. Positive behavior strategies are very important, and this is what parents and teachers can do to promote those strategies. Children need to know that the rules apply everywhere and to everyone. It's not fair in their mind if they do something and they get disciplined and another child does it and nothing happens. So everything has to be applied to everywhere and everyone equally. Everyone should participate in the process of deciding what these rules are and also what the consequences are going to be. Keep in mind that there are rules that are fixed and there are rules that can be bent. If the child has input on what these rules are, they're more likely to follow the rules. And sometimes teachers will do this at the beginning of the year. They will set up what are called classroom rules, and the whole class participates in what will be classroom rules, and they are posted somewhere in the classroom. So everybody knows what is expected of the child in the classroom setting. And rules may be different for each family. Classroom rules will also vary according to the age of the child and the material being taught. Children in our class are going to be having different rules of behavior than a child in a history class. and they must be consistent when applying house and classroom rules. If children get into trouble by breaking the rule and they do the same thing again and nothing happens, then that rule goes by the wayside. If that happens repeatedly, that they get targeted for not following the rules and the other kids in the house or or school aren't, then they start to feel that they are picked on or targeted and disliked, and that may in turn lead to increased negative behaviors. Next slide. Positive and negative consequences. Children must understand what consequences are. A positive consequence or reward helps the child learn what to do. These could be stickers, points, money, whatever, positive comments, hugs. A negative consequences or punishment help a child to learn what is not to happen and stop negative behaviors that may result in worse behaviors unless that new skill is taught. So be careful with punishment. If you do not teach the new skill, the inappropriate behaviors may continue and they may escalate. Always choose consequences that are meaningful to the child. Some adults may feel that a negative consequence or punishment is appropriate for bad behavior. After all, the intent is to provide a consequence that makes it less likely for the behavior to happen again. However, some children, when they are punished for bad behaviors, often see this as a good result of their behavior. For example, if the child wants to go home and negative behavior gets them sent home, then that negative behavior will continue. That's considered negative reinforcement. The child then needs more positive behavior reinforcements to see that he needs to be in school in order to learn and not at home. And so positive behavior strategies often work much better than punishment, especially children with ADHD who oftentimes can't remember what they are being punished for. So positive reinforcement often works better for a child with an ADHD diagnosis. And sometimes these will be written into goals and objectives for the child. A child may have a behavior intervention plan called a BIP. So there are other options for schools that can address problematic behaviors and keep the child in the classroom and ready to learn rather than at home. Next slide. Positive behavior strategies also include teaching strategies before the problem arises. That includes social stories, pictures, whatever strategy works for the student, also to calm down. What techniques work for a child, maybe counting to 10, counting backwards from 10, slow breathing, secret signals, problem-solving steps, and also self-monitoring skills. How are they feeling? A lot of times you'll ask children how they're feeling and they don't know. So that is an area where you could definitely work on how are you feeling? And this may be on a scale of 1 to 10, a happy face to a sad face, or some kind of a strategy where they can point out how they are feeling. And they need to identify their feelings and emotions in order to provide strategies to help eliminate or modify any of the negative behaviors. And you can also use modeling and scripts, play acting, and also pre-teaching can help children eliminate problems when the child with ADHD goes into a new environment or a new situation. As stated earlier, transitions are difficult for a child with ADHD, and new behavioral skills have to become a habit, and it could take months of repetition before they have a habit. So be patient. Those of you who have been on diets know it takes at least 3 months to change an eating pattern. It also may take 3 months or longer for a child to change a behavioral pattern. Next slide. IEP and 504 plans for handling difficult situations. If your child does need a break, where will your child go? When will your child go? And who does your child report to? A lot of times children report to the library, the principal's office, or the nurse's office. And that way it prevents them from being embarrassed in front of their peers by having a meltdown. These strategies also can be part of a behavioral intervention plan, as I said earlier, called a BIP. And it is important to have a predetermined secret signal set up between your child and the teacher, and also the safe place for your child to report, and also strategies to calm down and strategies on how will he or she return to the classroom. And don't give up. Children with ADHD can and do learn when families, teachers, and others work as a team to provide a consistent approach to behavioral change. Once one goal is mastered, move on to the next while maintaining the last. As they grow and learn, the goals and issues will change as your child ages through their academic career. Next. Never give up. Children with ADHD will learn and succeed with your help and support. In conclusion, take heart with the quote by Thomas Edison on how many times he failed to invent the light bulb. Another think outside the box person with ADHD. I have not failed 700 times. I have not failed once. I have succeeded in providing 700 ways that will not work. When I have eliminated all the ways that will not work, I will find the way that will work. And eventually he did. With persistence, determination, and love, you will find what works for your child and students with ADHD. And thank you for your attention. And I'll turn this back over to Tammy.
Thank you, Martha. So much to cover. So thank you for hanging in there with us, everyone. I know it's 8 o'clock and we thought we were going to leave some time, but we can still stay on if that's okay with Mark, if there's any questions, or if anybody wants to share any comments. But before we do that, I just want to wrap up and give you a little bit of summary. Just to summarize what Martha has said, our purpose is to support families of children with disabilities. We also, all of our services, like I said in the beginning, are at no cost to the parents. We really do rely on those evaluations to help us. So go ahead and fill those out. And we are here to give a voice to parents and children dealing with life's challenges. As you can see over on the right-hand side, we have our phone contact. So if you need help in your area, you don't know who your contact person, you have the right person sitting on here with you today. That's Martha Laze, who is our referral specialist if you contact us. And then also, if you see the QR code at the bottom, this is where you can go ahead and take your phone right now and scan it. And it'll take you right to that registration and evaluation link. And of course, please visit our website. We have a wealth of resources on there, our Facebook page. We also have Twitter. And we have those links right there for you. And with that being said, here we are. We have the QR code again. So your feedback is very important to us. So we can't tell you how much we rely on those evaluations. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Mark and see if there's any questions in the chat.
Nothing so far, but I just want to say thanks a lot, Martha. That was fantastic. Very comprehensive. A couple things you said I thought applied to situations we've been in, and one in particular, you suggested using Post-it notes, which we've done with a client, even color-coded Post-it notes, one for the teacher, one for the parent, and then use those to put things in kind of item or orders of importance for a child, and that worked wonders for one student we had. And then you mentioned something about making sure that you communicate the accommodations either on the 504 plan or on the IEP to the extracurricular coach or mentor. And that I thought was an excellent tip, because their accommodations especially are useful in extracurriculars, especially including sports. And if those aren't communicated, there can be issues that arise. And so it's sometimes, for whatever reason, there's a broken line of communications between teachers and coaches. And so as the parent, you want to make sure that that happens, that those accommodations are passed on and they understand what they mean. And if they need a break, they get to take a break. And if they need other accommodations, that they get to take those in extracurriculars too. So overall, I just thought it was awesome. So thank you very much, Martha.
You're welcome.
Agree. I agree, Mark, and I think too, when we talk about accommodations, as the child, when appropriate, as they get older, to empower them, and to bring them in, because when we get into high school and, you know, we were talking about their transition plans, whether they're on a 504 or an IEP, they need to be responsible for those accommodations, because once they go to college, those accommodations are going to be their responsibility. And knowing what works for them and what doesn't work is really, really crucial. Because a lot of times, you know, we see that kitchen sink approach where we're like, this is what we, you know, preferential seating, and it might not be meaningful to that child. So making sure that those accommodations are meaningful. So I agree with you 100%. And I just want to tell you in the chat, I don't see any questions, but Martha, they're saying good seminar. Thank you for tonight's presentation. And that's it. So we're here if anybody, I don't know if you want to wrap it up, Mark, or if you want to leave it open for, I don't know, it's up to you.
Yeah, I would just mention that you still have time if you want to go to the link. Again, this one is to sign up for the next seminar, which will be in August again, English and Spanish language supports by OCECD. That will be the second Monday in August, which is the 8th. And that'll be the next workshop. But you also have time this month if you want to sign up for an individual guidance session with an attorney from either our firm, Albite Weicker, or Disability Rights Ohio. Those are free also. Those are 2 weeks from tonight. They'll be in the afternoon, 2 weeks from tonight, so the 4th Monday. And for this month, they're on the 4th Monday. But in any case, you can sign up through the same link, lawyersforstudents.com/legal clinic, the same place you signed up for tonight's workshop. And you can sign up for the individual guidance session or the next workshop from OCECD. So yeah, no questions in the chat box. So thank you very much, Martha and Tammy. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.